Hello, welcome to Post-Colonial Space. I'm Masood Raja, and today I will be offering in this brief video a summary of Chapter 3 of Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Now, you already know summaries are not my favorite thing, but we have just concluded a page-by-page reading and discussion of Chapter 3, so I thought it would be apt just to give you my concluding thoughts on the chapter and just sum up some of the major themes in the chapter. Now, if you have watched the entire series, we know that in Chapter 1, Freire basically defines the dichotomous view of the world in which there are oppressors and the oppressed, and the project of education being providing every one of us a chance to realize our full humanity. There is a romanticized view of a centralized human subject in Chapter 1. In Chapter 2, he spends a lot of time in describing the two modes of pedagogy, one that he calls the banking system and the other that he calls the problem-posing system of education. And he gives us the disadvantages of the banking system and then the possibilities affiliated with the problem-posing or problem-solving educational system, which he also would call the dialogic mode of pedagogy. Chapter 3, in my opinion, is probably the most important because it's in Chapter 3 that Freire finally gives us a method of creating, designing, and almost perfecting a dialogical problem-posing mode of education. And I think that's why this chapter is highly significant in our understanding of Freire's work. So here we go. I'll go chronologically and give you my ideas of what is covered in this chapter. So please keep in mind that I've covered this chapter in 11 separate conversations with you, and I highly recommend that you watch them, right? But the chapter starts with a discussion of dialogue, right? He is trying to explain to us that the most productive aspect of human communication is dialogic. A dialogue presupposes that two parties, two constituencies, talk to each other as equals, right? And then he gives us several attributes of what a dialogue ought to have in order for it to be a true dialogue. So first of all, it must have love of the world and of humanity, because unless you love humanity and love the world, you would not like to work for humanity, nor would you like to transform the world. So a dialogue is not a confrontational exchange. It must be guided by love. The second attribute is that it must come from a place of humility. If you are being dialogic or if you're dialoguing with another, it won't be a dialogue if you say my opinions are more important than yours. No, you must enter it with a certain degree of humility where you bring your own knowledge, but you also acknowledge that others have something to share and teach you. So love and humility. The third and important aspect of a dialogic situation is faith. Not the traditional faith, but faith in humanity. Faith in this idea that human beings are naturally good, but that they can transform their own lived conditions if we all work together. So faith in that possibility of humanity is the third. So we have love, humility, and faith. And then the fourth one is trust. That if two parties are dialoguing, they must trust each other. Whatever I offer must be trustworthy. It must be provably trustworthy. Because if there is no trust between two parties who are in a dialogue, then it cannot be a genuine, authentic dialogue. So love, humility, faith in people, and trust between various parties. And then hope. We cannot dialogue out of despair. We cannot dialogue about pessimistic view of the world. A dialogue must have hope, hope of change, hope of transformation. Only then will two parties come together and have a conversation about transformation. And then finally, a dialogue must involve critical thinking. It cannot be sermonizing. It cannot be propaganda. It must encourage the participants to think critically about what they are proposing, about their own lived conditions in the world, and about what they are trying to encounter in the world. So critical thinking is a huge part of it. So dialogue must have love, humility, faith in people, trust between various parties, hope, and critical thinking. So just think of it. If we apply these principles of being a dialogical pedagogue or teachers in a classroom and take these attributes with us, that we love our students, we enter a classroom with a certain degree of humility where we are not the carriers of all the knowledge. We have faith in our students' abilities and in their aspirations to learn. And we trust our students and they trust us, right? And then we have a hopeful pedagogy, a pedagogy that gives them individual hope, collective hope, but is hopeful of the world, and then encourages critical thinking, right? In even our classrooms, we would have created a transformative classroom experience. So after he has discussed dialogue, what he's trying to encourage us is to develop a dialogical mode of education. Then he says, okay, if you want to deliver education or bring education to a certain part, you choose the part where you want to go, but then you want to study the logic within which those people are existing. That is what he calls a thematic universe. What are the larger themes that they have internalized? How do they work? How are they implemented? So even before you go into a territory and start developing a curriculum, you have to study it to know what themes exist, what is the thematic universe, what do the people believe in, how have they internalized it. And it's only after you have figured out the thematic universe of a given situation, right? And then its generative themes. Remember, he has taught us that themes are generative. They produce other themes, right? So for example, if the generative theme of any given place that you go into is a hierarchical, where people have internalized that certain people are superior and they are inferior, right? That is the larger theme of a dichotomous, naturalized social system. Within that, then that theme would generate other themes. How to behave? Do we ask permission? What are the marriage rituals? Who upholds the law? All of these are associated with that larger thematic universe in which certain people are supposed to have more value than others, right? So themes are generative, right? Then he teaches us that in any given theme or a place where people live, they encounter limit situations. Limit situations are that foreclose the possibilities of change and transformation. Most people would think that limit situations are a challenge and hinder progress. But what Freire is teaching us is that limit situations also open up to possibilities. Because when we acknowledge what the limit situations are in any given thematic universe, then we can try to figure out how to go beyond them, right? And that is where his term untested feasibility comes in. Now, untested feasibility is something that is beyond the limit situations, which can be imagined, but no one has lived it, no one has practiced it. So if we study a thematic universe, within that the limit situations, then we can also study the possible untested feasibility, and that becomes our goal, right? So we are now in the process of thinking about how to develop curriculum for a certain given place. And the first part of it is to study the thematic universe. And the next step would be what he calls a thematic investigation, right? Which has 4 stages. And this is the heart of the book in terms of praxis, because he's teaching us how to do our research in the process of developing a literacy program, right? So the first is collection of data. So investigators come in, they study the thematic universe, and then they involve local volunteers, and they collect data about how people live their lives in different aspects of life. The investigators inform themselves of the area, they collect data, the local people collect data, and then they have conversations with the people. All of this data is then compiled, right? Stage 2 is when they have evaluation meetings, right? In these meetings, then the investigators, along with the local volunteers, study the materials that they have gathered, right? Collate it, find out who has said what. They are further honing their knowledge of what kind of thematic universe these people exist in, what are the issues that are important to them, right? And this is where what comes to them is what people have represented through their real consciousness, through their lived experience. The idea is to transform it to a potential consciousness, a consciousness that is aware of the real world, but can also imagine a world beyond that. So the second stage in these evaluation meetings, everyone writes a report, they share the report, they discuss it, then they take it back to the people and discuss it with them. Then they also develop certain codified representations of it, pictures, graphs, and everything, right? In the third stage, they return to the area, right? And have decoding dialogues with the people. What does it mean? So you've created a picture from the knowledge gained from the people. Let's say a woman working in the house, a man walking, right? And then you have meetings with the people and show them the images and ask them to decode it. That will give you access to their view of the imagist representation of their own reality. The idea is that people are so deeply ingrained in their own lived experience that they haven't even thought of it critically. They think of it as natural. It's moving them from that to looking at their own reality as an object of study, and then making them aware of their own reality. But throughout, they are participants in that. And then in the fourth stage, you've developed codes, pictures, everything else. You've had dialogues with the people. Then you involve specialists, right? Anthropologists, sociologists, psychologists who go and interact with the people and develop their own reports, right? They give you the specialized view. But the main key is that you connect those specialized views. And then you develop a curriculum, which can have hinged themes. Now, hinged themes are the themes that may not have come out in the conversations, but which are crucial in connecting one part to the other. So after you have done that, then you have pictures, you have recorded tapes, you have graphs. You take them again to the people and ask them to respond to them, try to decipher them. And that the way they decipher them then gives you insights into how are people responding to auditory or pictorial representations of their own reality. He gives you this example that, ask a scholar to write an essay or record a tape. Send that tape to the people, ask them to listen to it, introduce them to this scholar, this intellectual, show them his picture, and then ask the people what did they get from that. Whatever the people share is then their idea of how they are receiving that expert advice. That you pass on to the intellectual, who then learns, oh man, I was thinking about it this way, but this is what the people are saying about it. What it does is it enables the intellectual to further hone their way of looking at a culture, but it also enables the people to critique the works of intellectuals, but also participate in a conversation with that. Now, driving all of this is what Freire calls the anthropological concept of culture. By that, what he means is that a concept of culture in which the humans are centered. But culture is not static. Human beings, with their collective will, can transform it. This process of education, by going into a territory, studying its thematic universe, meeting the people, collecting data, interacting with people, bringing in specialists, then going back, producing materials, discussing those materials with those who will use them, and then developing a curriculum, all is geared towards transformation, right? Transformation of the thematic universe, because only then will people be able to go beyond the limit situations, right? And that is when Freire says, after we've done all this, we would have articulated some sense of a pedagogy of the oppressed. So that's all I have today. I hope this is useful to you. Now please keep in mind that this summary is just a summary. I do encourage you to watch the whole series, chapter by chapter. And then if you have any questions that I can answer in the comments, please post them in the comments. If you like this series, do let me know. That always encourages me more and more. And if you have not subscribed to the channel, please feel free to do so now. Thank you so much. Please take care of each other, take care of yourselves, and I will now see you next time. Until then, as always, peace and love.